Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Gregg Corombos and Jim Garrity.
And welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, along with Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Gregg Corombos of Radio America. We have good, and crazy martinis for conservatives today. One of these days we'll get back to the regular format. This week doesn't seem to be it. So we also want to let you know we're sponsored today by ExpressVPN. Protect your online activity today and get 3 months of service free. ExpressVPN.com/martini. Much more on that a little bit later in the podcast. Jim, there's a new strong supporter of the presumption of innocence in our country, and his name is Michael Avenatti. This is from NBC Los Angeles. Michael Avenatti, the attorney representing Stormy Daniels in her legal battle with President Donald Trump, was arrested Wednesday in the Los Angeles area on suspicion of domestic violence. He was released on bail hours later. The police report was filed Tuesday night by an unidentified victim at a residence on the 10,000 block of Santa Monica Boulevard in Century City, according to the Los Angeles Police Department. The LAPD tweeted that it was an ongoing investigation. The department would not reveal the identity of the reporting party or the exact nature of the person's injuries. Avenatti was arrested and booked on felony domestic charges Wednesday afternoon. Police said he was released from custody around 5:30, and his bail was set at $50,000. He calls the charges completely bogus. A statement issued through his lawyer this morning says, quote, "I wish to thank the hardworking men and women of the LAPD for their professionalism. They were only doing their jobs in light of the completely bogus allegations against me. I have never been physically abusive in my life, nor was I last night. Any accusations to the contrary are fabricated and meant to do harm to my reputation. I look forward to being fully exonerated," unquote. So, Jim, he's a huge fan of due process now. My biggest beef in this is the media keeps labeling him as Stormy Daniels' attorney, which is true, but he's also Julie Swetnick's attorney, and he trotted out that allegation with so many holes it's coming from a Swiss cheese factory.
Greg, wait, no, this is 2020 presidential contender of the Democratic Party, Michael Avenatti, not merely lawyer to porn stars and accusers and stuff like that. When this came across from TMZ late yesterday afternoon, Greg, I really was, this is almost too good to be true. And I say good to be true. Look, if this is accurate, someone has suffered a violent crime, and that's awful. But it did seem like almost an O. Henry story of perfect irony that a guy who has mobilized, and particularly during the Swetnick accusations that were not adjudicated in a court of law, but were adjudicated in the court of public opinion. Apparently took place decades earlier with no supporting witnesses or something like that. We know very little about the victim. We just know that whatever it was serious enough for the Los Angeles Police Department to press charges and to hold him at $50,000 bond. He was released. He will have his day in court, and that's probably the way these things should be done. Greg, it would be terrible if this victim waited 30 years,
right,
and came forward, with these kinds of accusations of abominable behavior long after Avenatti had moved on to different stages in his life with no supporting evidence. That would be awful. The other thing which I noticed, and again, look, we don't know what happened. I do, fairly or not, your reputation precedes you. The kind of person you are precedes you. And while I'm sure there are a bunch of Republicans that I always knew this guy was sleaze. I'm sure he did it. There may be a certain number of Democrats who are not fans of him and are not inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt. I just went through this late yesterday, though, Greg, and I just found it is fascinating how often he uses these combat and fighting metaphors. And again, this doesn't mean he did it, but when you have a reputation for constantly describing violence, people might think you're a violent person. On his website, Greg, it says, if you can't take a punch, you don't belong in the ring. In light of this, all these are cringe-inducing. Quote, "Don't tell me what cases you've won. Tell me who you've beaten." His political action committee is literally called Fight Pack, Greg. And just as one headline, his whole public persona has been about how tough he is and how he's a fighter. New York Times called him fast and furious. His speeches in Iowa, when they go low, I say we hit harder. When he said that he wants to fight Trump. And I think it was probably the worst one that really had me cringing was from middle of August. He says he will hit harder to beat Trump in 2020. Again, Domestic violence is not something anyone should be laughing about, but at the same time, this is each one of these just has you cringing. And I think it's kind of fair to wonder, look, we don't know if this turns out, if is found guilty, I think there'll be a fair question of CNN and MSNBC and any other network that kind of, you didn't just roll out the red carpet for him, that basically turned him into a media celebrity. That's why he's being invited to speak in Iowa and invited to speak in New Hampshire, and the Vermont Democratic Party just canceled a fundraiser with him, right? He became a celebrity because the cable news networks fell in love with this guy and decided to put him front and center. It's pretty clear they knew very little about him, and it now appears that maybe he's got some sort of dark side. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not true. Maybe this is all false accusation. Maybe somebody's out to get him or something like that. But you want to talk about being hoist on your own petard. Michael Avenatti, as I put it this morning in the Morning Jolt today, Greg, he's finding out that karma can punch twice as hard, too.
Well, between the fact that a lot of Democrats blame him for overplaying the anti-Kavanaugh hand that he decided to jump into with Julie Swetnick and the ridiculous gang rape allegations and so forth, this should put an end to 2020 ambitions for him. I know his ego's big enough that he might still give it a shot, but if there was ever an actual avenue for him to make any traction, that's dead, right?
You certainly like to think so, Greg, but we live in strange times. Things that are, I'm sure the new Gary Hart movie coming out, I think it's called The Candidate or The Campaign or something like that, is going to make the argument of how naive and simple we were back in the late 80s when we thought a politician merely having an affair was a career-ending scandal. Greg, I just want to point out that, when I do the absolute worst decisions and worst mistakes of my life, I just hope they can get Hugh Jackman to play me in the movie, too. Well, that'll show him. Take that, Gary Hart.
If, in fact, anything happened here with Avenatti, he definitely did it in the wrong part of Los Angeles. As you and I well know, Century City has some of the best police that you can find in the L.A. Police Department. That's the beat that Al Powell had. Sometimes you get visiting cops from New York City, for example, that visit their estranged wife in a skyscraper in Century City. If you're a criminal in that area, you're really rolling the dice.
The only hope you'd have, Greg, is if the investigation was taken over by the FBI.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But, one of the things that was very much overlooked in that movie, and really the linchpin to the whole terrorist operation, was hacking in to the vault at the Nakatomi Corporation. And if you want protection from hacking, ExpressVPN is where you need to go to protect yourself from that. With all the recent news about online security breaches, and you see it in the news every day, it's hard not to worry about where your data goes. Making an online purchase or simply accessing your email could put your private information at risk. You're being tracked online by social media sites, marketing companies, and your mobile or internet provider. Not only can they record your browsing history, but they often sell it to other corporations who then want to profit from your information. And that's why you can make the smart decision to take back your privacy by using ExpressVPN.
Greg, I was looking at some of the headlines, and just in the last couple of days, Target's Twitter account was hacked and used for a Bitcoin scam. The official Google Twitter account was hacked by a Bitcoin scam. Now, I'm going to guess the people at Google and people at Target know more about computer security than the average Joe, or certainly that I do. The iPhone X, it turns out, can be hacked to pull up your recently deleted files. And oh, by the way, Bakersfield, California has now had its online payment system hacked as well. This is all terrifying, which is why you need something like ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN has easy-to-use apps that run seamlessly in the background of your computer, phone, or tablet. Turning on ExpressVPN protection just takes one click. ExpressVPN secures and anonymizes your internet browsing by encrypting your data and hiding your public IP address. Protecting yourself with ExpressVPN costs less than $7 a month. It is rated the #1 VPN service by TechRadar and comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you ever use public Wi-Fi and want to keep hackers and spies from seeing your data, ExpressVPN is the solution. And if you don't want to hand over your online history to your internet provider or data resellers, ExpressVPN is the answer for you.
It couldn't be more clear. Protect your online activity today and find out how you can get 3 months of that protection for free at expressvpn.com/martini. That's expressvpn.com/martini for 3 months free when you get a 1-year package. expressvpn.com/martini to learn more. All right, let's move on to our second good martini now. And Jim, it comes to us courtesy of New York Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo. Not usually in the good martini, but when he is, it's because he's either done something really nuts or he's actually admitted something that he probably didn't want to. And that's the case this time, courtesy of the New York Times. We were just talking about this yesterday when New York City and Arlington, Virginia, in the Crystal City neighborhood, won the split headquarters for Amazon HQ2. So $2 billion in tax giveaways combined, and about 3/4 of that came from New York City without the mayor and the governor even consulting the city council, which we talked about. Really, really fun. So the New York Times has this. Governor Andrew Cuomo defended the deal, arguing that New York has to offer incentives because of its comparatively high taxes. At 6.5%, New York's corporate income tax rate is only modestly higher than Virginia's 6%, according to the Tax Foundation. But other business and individual taxes are higher in New York. Quote, "It's not a level playing field to begin with," Mr. Cuomo said in an interview Tuesday. "All things being equal, if we do nothing, they're going to Texas," unquote. So, Jim, even Cuomo knows this deep down. It's anti-business, it's anti-jobs when you keep saddling people and business with taxes. And if you do the opposite, they're going to want to be where you are.
You know, Greg, I'm seeing this from Andrew Cuomo. I'm like, wow, this guy, he sees how high taxes are hurting the state, how it's driving businesses away, how it's making the state uncompetitive. I wish that guy would run for governor. Dear Mr. Cuomo, what are you doing up there in Albany? How do you think the state got like this? Even if he wanted to say, oh, it wasn't my fault. This is, I've only been governor for, 8 going on 9 years and for, just got reelected for another term. Look, blame the guy who was governor up in the 80s and 90s. That was the guy who really loused things up. Look, I'm sure that CNN will do a huge primetime special on this. I mean, Cuomo's coming up everywhere. I mean, like on the one hand, I'm glad he said this. I'm glad he acknowledges this. This, on the other hand, points out, like, gee, if maybe you should do something about that. And the answer to this that, most of us on the right side of the spectrum would say the answer is not to give giant multi-million dollar giveaways to particular companies. The answer is to lower taxes across the board so that every company has a chance to thrive. You don't get to go the guys who come in with the biggest razzle-dazzle, PowerPoint presentation. You're not supposed to write giant tax exemptions and giveaways and special deals and stuff like that. This is exactly what we mean when we say crony capitalism. This is exactly what we mean when we talk about government picking winners and losers. It's a terrible idea. It's interesting that he says it. Now again, why does he think people are doing that move to Texas? Nicer weather? For a long time there was this move. So I guess it kind of started in the 70s and 80s, the Sun Belt. Companies moving further down south because they wanted to save on energy costs. The food's good down there. Shinerbach. There's a lot of nice things down in Texas, but I'm going to guess that the tax and regulatory environment makes it very easy for companies to grow and hire and expand and do what they want and not look like the state and the local governments are looking over their shoulder every 5 minutes, looking to tax the bejesus out of them. It is wonderful to see this begrudging, belated, awareness on the part of Governor Cuomo. It is unbelievably infuriating that he doesn't realize that he's responsible in large part for the problems of the state, that the condition that they're in, and that lower taxes across the board would be a much better solution than making giant concessions to one particular employer.
You remember when Cuomo's talking about how America's never been that great? New York's tax code has never been that great. And really, until everyone is treated equally by the tax code, we're never going to be great.
I was going to say, can we also maybe say the Cuomos have never been that great?
I think we could definitely agree on that.
There's probably some perfectly fine other Mario Cuomo's son named Iggy Cuomo, who's who runs a deli in Brooklyn, and he's fine.
Oh, man. Haven't we even gotten to the crazy one yet? Okay, now we get to the crazy one. There are still some unresolved elections out there, in case you haven't realized it. There's still a handful in the House. There's obviously the big races being recounted now in Florida, Senate and governor especially. I think there's a very close statewide office there too, agriculture commissioner or something. And then, of course, there's what's happening in Georgia. It's pretty clear Brian Kemp got the most votes, but he's got to get to a majority of the votes cast in order to avoid a runoff. But by the time they figure out whether there's going to be a runoff, we're going to be at the runoff election date, I think. Over among the Democrats, they've decided that even though the Republicans are ahead in all these races, that if the Republicans stay ahead and win, they were stolen, particularly in Georgia. Senator Sherrod Brown speaking yesterday at the National Action Network event in Washington.
That's why I say in America we will never give up the hallowed ground of patriotism to the extremists at our State House, Joyce, and the extremists in this White House. And we also will never give in, as Senator Cardin said, we'll never give in on voting rights. We have seen if Stacey Abrams doesn't win in Georgia, they stole it. It's clear. It's clear. And I say that publicly, it's clear. What they're trying to do in Florida to the gubernatorial candidate and to the Senate candidate running for re-election.
I love the fact that Sherrod Brown is railing against extremists in front of a National Action Network backdrop, which, of course, was founded by Al Sharpton. He's not the only potential 2020 candidate saying that if Kemp wins, it was stolen. Cory Booker, who was not up for re-election this year, says from a perspective where I have not been in the weeds, but said based on what he's seen, he's convinced that Abrams isn't getting a fair shot. Quote, I think that Stacey Abrams' election is being stolen from her using what I think are insidious measures to disenfranchise certain groups of people, said Booker. And further on in Sherrod Brown's quote, he's talking about how Republican policies manipulate votes because of redistricting, which I'm pretty sure is not a factor in a governor's race. But, you do you, Sherrod Brown. He also, of course, thinks voter suppression is afoot. Not to be outdone, this is a two-fisted crazy martini. President Trump yesterday talking to the Daily Caller. He says the Republicans don't win, and that's because of potentially illegal votes, he complained. When people get in line that have absolutely no right to vote and they go around in circles, sometimes they go to their car, put on a different hat, put on a different shirt, come in and vote again. Nobody takes anything. It's really a disgrace what's going on. If you buy a box of cereal, you have a voter ID, Trump continued. They try to shame everybody by calling them racist or calling them anything they can think of when you say you want voter ID, but voter ID is a very important thing. Now, Jim, I think you and I are very much in agreement with him that voter ID, photo ID, is a great way to make sure that the right people are voting in the right places, and it reduces any chances of mischief in elections. But you don't get voter IDs by buying a box of cereal, I'm pretty sure. I don't know if people changing their shirts and getting back in line. And by the way, if you don't get the most votes, Senators Booker and Brown, you don't win, and it wasn't necessarily stolen. What do you say?
Got lots to unpack there, Greg. The first is when Sherrod Brown says he talks about the extremists in the White House and extremists in our state. They say state house, state legislature. Because is he referring to newly elected Governor Mike DeWine?
I don't know.
Because I'm trying to imagine anybody on earth who's less of an extremist than Mike DeWine. What is Mike DeWine extreme about? His choice of salad dressing? He eats scrambled eggs and ketchup. What is extreme? So this devaluing of the term extremist is very much at work there. I love the heads I win, tails you lose setup, where if the Democrats win the races in Florida and Georgia, well, it means that democracy has worked and the votes have been honored and counted honorably, blah blah blah. But if the Republicans win, well, the election's stolen, right? This is exactly the phenomenon that is most infuriating, and what probably you want to talk about things that tear down our democracy, that tear down people's faith in the system. Russia doesn't have to do this, right? This is an Ohio Democratic senator saying that only one party can win a legitimate election. Now I know Sparty. I suppose I should give Senator Spartacus a little bit of credit for acknowledging that he isn't down in the weeds, but it's the exact same thing. We're like, well, there's no way we could legitimately lose. The hell do they know this? They're up in Washington. They're from Ohio and New Jersey. They're not down there doing the count in Florida. What's more, if you look at the history of these sorts of things, you have only seen 3 races that were statewide in the since the year 2000 that have been reversed because of a recount. In all of those ones, the margins were by the hundreds, not by the thousands. And the margins of both Rick Scott and Bryant Kemp and DeSantis all were in the tens of thousands, about 15,000, 30,000, 5-figure sums, right? It's just not going to, unless there's some sort of massive, diamond machines were hacked by Russia, that kind of stuff. You're not going to see these things flip. You don't generally find tens of thousands of new votes hidden under the couch cushions, and when you do, that should raise suspicions. You wonder, we think Republicans are paranoid about this. Well, look, the 3 races that were switched. Washington governor's race, Minnesota Senate race, and I believe it was a want to say it was state auditor up in Vermont. It was some lesser-known state position up there. All three of them, Republican won on election night, and then the recount found more votes, and the Democrat just happened to win. There's a reason Republicans get really upset about this sort of thing, and this kind of rhetoric from the Democrats does not help them. Finally, having said that, Greg, the only explanation I can think of for you requiring ID to purchase cereal is because of the long-standing ties between Lucky the Leprechaun and Lucky Charms and the Irish Republican Army back in the 1980s. They both hung out with Peter King. Trump's point about, a good idea for, by the way, so among those, yes, I think you need voter ID. I also think the state should make it extremely easy to get identification. And most states, it is fairly easy. Most people function fairly easy, are able to do this. But you know what? Maybe you're really elderly. I know there are some people, including some of my colleagues up in New York, who never got a driver's license because they never drove. I try not to mock them too much, Greg, but some people go through life and don't get a driver's license, and thus they don't have state-issued ID. I don't think you should charge people. I think it become a little close to a poll tax. The state should make it really, really easy for you to get a photo ID of one form or another, verify your identity, and ensure that you only vote once. And if that works out, terrific. I don't know what the president is describing with the changing clothes and all that kind of stuff. But hearing Trump say you need ID to buy cereal. Maybe he was thinking cold medicine or Sudafed or something like that, and that's what he was thinking of.
Right.
Before Democrats scoff, I'll remind people Barack Obama at one point said it's easier to buy a gun than a book. Greg, I go to Barnes & Noble pretty regularly, the occasional independent bookstore. Are they fingerprinting you when you go to purchase a book?
Nope.
People who say it's easier to buy a gun than to buy a book have not bought either one of them recently.
That's right. And if the Diebold machines, they're worried about fraud, they should get ExpressVPN. So that's one.
There you go.
That's one.
See, a little extra in there for our fine folks at ExpressVPN.
Exactly. State officials, go for it. You can do it. Jim, I will be out tomorrow, but you'll be here. Have fun. See you Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Gregg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And again, do visit our sponsors and protect your online activity today. ExpressVPN.com/martini. I'll be here on Monday, but tune in on Friday for the very next 3 Martini Lunch.